The story takes place about a year ago. I was traveling alone on a road trip to visit my family. It was a really long drive. It would probably take 2 full days. During the first day, I booked a hotel a little after the middle of my trip. I wanted to drive a little more on the first day if possible. Things started well, and I only stopped a few times to put gas, to eat, and to go to the bathroom. I often stopped in places that were the fastest, usually rest areas and gas stations right off the highway. I had woken up early in the morning, so I had been awake for a while. But if I had enough caffeine, it would allow me to hold a maximum. However, it was until after 12 on dark or early evening because I was in traffic jams. There was a lot of traffic. I think there was road work, or it was a rush hour. Anyway, a few slowdowns later, I found myself a little behind the schedule I had set for myself, but the hotel was already booked, so I was able to make it. Finally, around 7 p.m., things started to clear up, and the roads were much quieter. I was still about 5 o'clock from the hotel. I took a break for gas, then went straight back on the road to save time. Around 10 p.m., I was still driving. It was 1:30, and I didn't know where I was. The roads were very quiet, and I was one of the only cars to drive. The area I was in seemed almost in the middle of nowhere. I was also very tired and had to go to the bathroom. I decided I had to stop and try an energy drink or something. My car had enough gas. I wasn't filling up. I looked for an easily accessible area on the side of the road where I could stop. There didn't seem to be much, though. Finally, I saw a sign indicating a rest area just ahead. I left the road and was glad that I could hope to regain some energy to finish the ride. However, as we approached, the rest area was a bit disappointing. It was very small, just a small building. There were a few parking spaces along the road that passed in front, then it was the highway again. The place was very dimly lit, and there was no one but me. I parked my car, then got out and stretched my legs. I had been driving for quite a while without a break. Then I entered the small building of the rest area. Around him was a small nervous area with a picnic table and what appeared to be a wood behind it. I had already passed a similar rest area earlier in the day. Once inside, I used the toilet, then left. There was nothing inside the building, just men's and women's toilets, and a small lobby for some brochures. There was no vending machine, which I was hoping to find to get an energy drink or something. In some rest areas, the vending machines are outside, on the side of the building rather than inside. I decided to go around and see if there was one. I went around next door, and it was amazing how darker and quieter it was. There I could hear crickets singing in the distance. The floor sloped slightly as I went around the building, but there was no vending machine. I went completely behind the building and walked to the other side. That's when I got a strange sensation, for no apparent reason. I stopped and looked around in the woods at night. Then I heard a noise. It looked like something was moving inside the woods, which was about 15 meters away. I thought an animal might be there, and I saw a tree branch move a little. I stopped to see what it was because I was curious, but part of me wanted to leave and run to the car to leave anyway. I stood there looking to see what it was. As my eyes adjusted more to the darkness, I began to notice something. There seemed to be a man crouching behind one of the trees watching me. I couldn't really make out anything about him, but he seemed to have a beard. After watching him for a few seconds, he suddenly stood up. There was no other car in the rest area, so I didn't know what he was doing there after he got up. The man took a few steps towards me. I had a really bad feeling, and the guy started sprinting towards me. I took my legs around my neck and ran as fast as I could to my car. I walked around the building and ran into the parking area. I could hear the man behind me. I managed to paint my car and throw myself inside before slamming and locking the door, struggling to start the engine and leave. The man joined my car. He started pounding on the window, and I backed away after he hit my window a few times. I went back to the highway and was really glad to get away from him. I decided to call the police and tell them what had happened. I didn't want anyone else to stop there and have to meet him. As for me, I was able to stop a little further down the road and buy myself an energy drink. I was in the middle of nowhere, but I got to my hotel just after Zuzurudno. The scariest thing that ever happened to me happened. This story happened to me in 2014 while visiting my great-grandparents in Goose Creek, South Carolina. We had left late in the morning around 11 Hancock to try to get there before dinner. The only reason we went was for a cruise vacation that my great-grandmother had paid for. It was going to be me, my mother, my father, my aunt, my other aunt, my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother, and a few other friends of my great-grandmother's. In the car, my mother and I had most of our luggage since my father had to join us a few days later because of his work. We made this decision to avoid the usual family conflicts that had separated our family at the time. My mom had just finished prepping the car, and she called me from the bottom of the stairs to get in the car, with my game bag for the road. I arrived running, eager to go on a road trip and see my family again. Because at that time he hadn't caused many of the problems that separated us. Today we started our route on secondary roads. Picturesque before we head to the city center and then jump on the highway. In this story I am only 7 years old, so I am still perfectly naive and ignorant of many things in the world. I'm also vague about the details of the people applied, so descriptions of clothes and such can be skewed. At the time I focused mostly on Minecraft and my Benny Booth collection, rather than the dangers of reality and strange people. After about 2 hours of driving, I told my mother that I needed to go to the bathroom. I had drank about 2 bottles of water and my bladder complained. As we were still close to a busy urban area of the city, there were many gas stations where we could stop. My mom asked me if I was hungry too, to which I enthusiastically said yes, as it meant we would eat fast food, which didn't happen often. So we took an exit and stopped shortly afterwards at the gas station. I was jumping out of my seat excitedly, ready to grab my chips, my favorite candy, a sugary drink that I knew my mother would later regret letting me drink. We got out of the car. My mother grabbed her purse and we headed to the bathroom. My mother waited patiently outside for me to go to the bathroom and took a few minutes. I got out and we walked around grabbing collections and drinks here and there. I had cheese parfums, pickles to nets, candy roll, Cheetos, sausage sticks, beef jerky and a Sprint and water from the cold shelves. My mom also had a handful of things, and then we went to the counter and stood in line. While waiting to pay, I would count the cars in the parking lot and how many of each brand there were, because at that time I was super obsessed with cars. My mom pulled my arm a bit as the line went up, so I followed him, glued to her like the 7-year-old I was. We approached the counter, greeted the cashier, paid for our belongings and left with 2 bags of snacks and 2 drinks. I was giddy with a big smile on my face the whole time, knowing that I will be ready for the rest of the trip with my so rare treats: a black man wearing a hoodie, red Nike off black sweatpants, black shoes and sunglasses entered the gas station. I especially noticed him because he was wearing sunglasses inside. He walked nonchalantly to the counter with a warm smile on his face and laid his arms on it. My mother also noticed and gave him the little smile you give to strangers when you don't want to start a conversation. He didn't notice and looked at the cashier. That's when things went wrong. Very quickly, the man hit the counter playfully and said, "Frenzy attitude. Give me all your money." The cashier looked at him confused, for the man acted as if he knew the cashier. The guy gave the cashier a few seconds before getting serious by slamming his hand on the counter, pulling out a gun and demanding the money again. This time he was serious and his request was not a joke. My mother began to drag me out of the store. While I watched in confusion and almost awe at what was happening before my eyes, she threw me in the car, not literally, but you know what I'm getting at, and quickly out of the parking lot at full speed. The last thing I saw from the gas station was the man putting his gun to the back of the cashier's head and shouting something inaudible to him. It's now been 7 years since that incident, and gas stations still give me an agonizing nervousness. Last I heard, the gas station had been demolished and a new building erected in its place. I know this is not the dramatic and chaotic ending that some of you might have hoped for. But it was still a scary and traumatic experience for me, so I thought I might share it and see if anyone else has gone through the same thing or knows more about the incident. I am a 23-year-old woman from the UK. When I was 18, I lived right next to a Starbucks, about a 15-minute walk away. At that time, I had very serious anxiety issues due to trauma. And part of my therapy was going out for a walk alone when it was a little dark outside. I didn't put myself in dangerous situations or do anything stupid, but I had to overcome my irrational fear of being out alone at night. It's important to note that this story takes place around 9 p.m. at the end of summer. I don't really remember if it was July or August, but it was about that time, I think, at that moment. Night falls only between 20:30 to 2300. Anyway, the Starbucks closed at 8 p.m. and right behind where the parking lot was a small hotel and gas station next door. There was also a gas station across the street which somehow competed with the other. It's relevant to history. I won't name the hotel or the gas stations for privacy reasons in case anyone wants to investigate and find out where this happened. I was taking a walk and was going to challenge myself to stay outside at least until 9:30. Then I'll walk home. I don't have a lot of mobile data on my phone, but the Starbucks offers free Wi-Fi even when closed, so I ended up in one of the seating areas outside so I could browse social media on my phone. And it calmed me down because I was afraid of being out at night all alone. I sat there for a while just minding my own business. The parking lot was deserted now, the gas station was nearby, and there were obviously cars going in and out. But the customers there couldn't see me because of the layout of everything around me. I was on the phone when suddenly I heard a loud scream coming from the hotel. I looked up. And it was like my brain couldn't figure out what was going on. Because I sat there frozen, watching two older men hanging from their windows screaming at me. It took me a second to figure out what was going on, and I was horrified. They were yelling at me and trying to get my attention, saying things like, "And why don't you come here, baby?" Like I said, I have big anxiety issues about going out at night, especially by myself. And I was really trying to solve these problems. I was so scared that I immediately grabbed my backpack and stood up without even putting the chair back where I was sitting under the table. And I started walking at full speed towards the parking lot exit towards the gas station. One of the men disappeared and the other yelled at me, "You have to go up to our room." After hearing this, my heart was pounding. I immediately called a family member and was almost crying out of fear. I was only 18. Yes, I was considered an adult in my country, but I still felt like a stupid teenager, as a woman who was accosted by these men who insulted me and demanded that I go up to their room. I knew they had very bad intentions. I didn't go into the gas station because I didn't feel safe and decided to cross the street to the other side and then go to the other gas station. It was because my mother worked there and I felt much safer going to her house where I knew she and her colleagues could protect me. The relative I was on the phone with told me to call the police, but I was too scared to hang up and begged him to stay on the line with me. She agreed, and trying to calm me down by telling me to cross the street. As I crossed, I looked behind me and the men were now following me. I couldn't believe what was happening. He looked to be in his 20s or early 30s, and personally I looked my age, otherwise younger. I started running without even worrying about getting hit by a car, because I knew I had to get away from them. I didn't dare look behind me in case they were chasing me. I sprinted to the gas station and immediately covered the crate and then told my mother what was going on. One of the people working with her that night was a man named Jason. Jason was really sturdy and big, built like a tank, as they say colloquially in my country. My mother took me into the bathroom and told me to stay there and lock the door. Jason heard everything and ran to the door and then to the forecourt to find the men. I was crying with relief now because I finally felt safe. My mother and a lady she worked with had tried to comfort me. Jason returned after a few minutes saying that the men ran away when they saw him coming. I really don't know what these men intended to do because following me to a place where people would see us was really stupid of them, but I know they had very bad intentions. Jason drove my mother and me home and we never saw his men again. I assumed they had to go back to the hotel after this experience. I didn't want my effort to end in failure. So the next week I walked to Starbucks at 9:00 p.m. and stopped in front of the hotel. I knew those men had moved on since then, but I needed to do it to prove to myself that I would get through this. Today, I dealt with my anxiety issues and I'm glad that they didn't slow down my therapy. It was really terrifying at the time and I still think about it sometimes. I just know they had something horrible planned for me. I wonder how long they watched me sitting with my phone. I am now always aware of my surroundings and I am never so immersed in anything that I would lose sight of my surroundings as far as I know. They could have been watching me all the time. They could have sneaked up on me, grabbed me and done God knows what to me. I was really lucky he was an idiot and just yelled at me, "Please stay safe, don't make the same mistake I did." Always be aware of your surroundings and if you find yourself in a scary situation, don't panic. Go to a safe place and call the police. You never know where the predators are hiding. I work at a gas station in New Zealand, and despite the downsides of dealing with some difficult customers, I have always really enjoyed my job. The station where I started has a lot of people who are homeless or in financial difficulty even though they have housing. One homeless person in particular became my stalker. When I started, my colleagues informed me that this man was coming and that we would give him a free cup of hot water to which he would add a few sachets of sugar. They mentioned that he was a little strange but generally harmless except for his tendency to swear frequently. I had compassion for him, especially in the winter. When I finally met him, I gave him his cup of hot water. However, this man didn't just pick up his drink and walk away. He would ramble on and talk about all kinds of nonsense, and I could never understand what he was talking about. He used the F word very frequently and spoke in gibberish. Some of my colleagues stopped serving it because it disturbed other customers, but another colleague and I continued to do so. In hindsight, that's probably where the problem started, because it started coming. When I worked alone, I worked from 2 lakh to 23 lakh and he always showed up in the evening. He never came during my days off, which varied every week, so he had to observe and note my work schedules as he walked by during the day, which I often noticed. I began to feel uncomfortable with his presence and the way he looked at me. However, having grown up in a Christian family, I was reluctant to send him back. My grandfather always told me, "Good manners cost nothing and never turn your back on charity." So I started serving him and then he started making comments about my appearance. Said my body and he stopped asking me for water. He just wanted me. He would walk in and come straight to me, then linger in the store for what seemed like hours. The critical moment was when he winked at me and told me that I still had a friend in him. The way he told me gave me chills, so I decided not to let him in anymore. By the time I was working alone, I would lock the doors because I knew he would appear. The problem was that I knew he was watching me. I could feel him. And as soon as the last customer left the forecourt, he would approach the doors. I caught him watching me several times a day from the alleys and bushes. We sent it back in hoping that would solve the problem. Unfortunately, this is not the case. He was always watching me, trying to get in and yelling at me through the doors when I refused to let him in. I called the police every time he showed up, but he managed to escape every time. It went on for months. I was scared 24/7 at work and even had nightmares at home. There have been countless incidents of harassment. The worst happened when I was on duty, filling up cars and cleaning pumps. We have speakers in all the pumps that are connected to an intercom inside, allowing us to communicate with customers without having to run outside. It is a large site with 12 pumps. We have speakers in all the pumps that are connected to an intercom inside, allowing us to communicate with customers without having to run outside. It is a large site with 12 pumps. We have speakers in all the pumps that are connected to an intercom inside, allowing us to communicate with customers without having to run outside. It is a large site with 12 pumps. While I was outside, I heard my colleague calling me inside through the speakers, her voice filled with panic as it was daylight. My first thought was that a customer was causing problems. I quickly entered and immediately heard the doors lock behind me. "Look over there by the bush," she said with wide eyes. I turned to look, and there he was, looking inside. The scariest part, he had one foot forward like he was ready to run and attack. As soon as the doors would open, my heart sank and I called the police, who arrived incredibly quickly. They were already there when I hung up. The officer informed me that he was going to be charged with criminal harassment and that a restraining order had been issued. However, he legally had to issue a warning before he could arrest him, and he was released that evening. But this incident was the last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. I was constantly terrified. The question was not if he would return, but when. The next day, I gave my 2-week notice. The management did not want to lose me and offered me a transfer to a remote site where they would never find me. That's what we thought. I accepted the transfer, and the new site was great. All staff have been instructed to disclose my new position to anyone, including regular customers. They were told to say I no longer worked for the company. For about 3 months, everything was peaceful. There was no sign of my stalker and I felt safe. I no longer had to constantly look at my shoulder. However, the relief did not last long. Barely a month ago, my case officer informed me that I had to appear in court. I was terrified to see it again, but convinced myself it was for the best. I had just accepted the fact that I could do it, and I will make sure that he is held accountable. But then the worst happened. He found me on the new site. He knows how he did it. I guess he asked a new employee at my old site, someone who wasn't aware of him, the harassment and the restraining order, and told him he had to take a bus or take a remarkably long walk. He was rapidly approaching the gates when I spotted him and fled in panic. I almost knocked over my boss, who saw the fear on my face and asked me what was wrong. I don't even remember what I said, but my manager locked us in his office and was incredibly supportive. She called the police and took care of everything. I was shaking and in shock. We all believed that I was safe, as the policeman in charge had assured me that he would never find me there. While we were on the phone with the police, we saw him walk around at least 3 times before the police arrived and apprehended him and placed him under arrest. Thank God. Needless to say, I could not sleep for the next few days while waiting for the hearing date. The fear that he would be released was immense. 2 days before the hearing, I prayed that he would be locked up forever and that I would be safe from now on. I wondered what I would do if he found me. It sounds dramatic said like that, but those who have ever been harassed must understand how I felt. I even added something to my prayer: if he comes out, I end my life. I felt like I was really desperate. Fortunately, my prayers were answered. The next day, when the officer in charge of my case called me, I had good news. He changed his plea and pleaded guilty. I was at work and I was jumping on the spot in front of customers. This is the most serene moment I've felt in almost a year, which has been the longest year of my life. But for now it's over. Finally, for now I still have to wait for the length of his sentence to be determined. But for now I can finally relax, knowing that this monster is no longer on the street and, more importantly, unable to get close to the bottom. I know it's not really over. My instinct tells me that when he's released he'll come back. This man is obsessed and mentally ill. The only thing that keeps me going is the saying, don't borrow trouble until it shows up at your door. But that's the problem. I know he'll be back at my door as soon as he can. Last night my boyfriend and I were driving home from Universal Studios in Orlando. We were diverted to a road we had never been to before. My boyfriend's speedometer is broken on his car, and he has to press the button to reset the mileage after filling up with gas, and you will see it will be important in history. We were driving on a deserted road in the middle of nowhere, with not a single car in sight. My boyfriend realized we had hit the 130-mile mark on his meter. We needed gas, but there was literally no gas station in sight. So we looked for gas stations and found one. It turned out to be closed. Being in a hurry, we finally found another one about 5 minutes away. This is where the story gets weird. My boyfriend thought he had closed his gas cap and we were back on this deserted road. We heard a loud bang and he realized he had forgotten to put the gas cap back on, so we stopped on this dark road looking for traffic jams. Eventually he stops his search, realizing that the gas cap is still in place. Out of nowhere, a horrible thought occurred to me about something wrong with this gas station. I put that idea aside because I knew we needed gas and car rental wasn't an option in the corner we were in. This road literally leads to a dead end to a gas station. The only way out of this area was to turn left or go straight out of the gas station. My boyfriend got out of the car to see if we could refuel, and the sensation intensified. I've literally never felt this way in my life. I had already experienced very disturbing situations such as having almost been kidnapped twice, having seen someone taken away in a body bag after being hit by a car, and even having experienced a paranormal situation. I saw a white car stop on the road to turn left. Keep in mind that there is literally no one on this road. He stops and notices my boyfriend and backs up with the windows down. Find this very strange because my boyfriend has a very nice sports car, and my mind. He immediately went into panic mode. I started shouting his name and the man realized that someone else was in the car. He turned left and sped off. Unfortunately, I couldn't pick up his license plate because of the darkness. It may not sound too scary, but it was easily one of the most terrifying things to watch because I didn't know if I was going to see my boyfriend get robbed at gunpoint or something. The feeling of anxiety I had had 10 minutes earlier was exacerbated. We finally found the gas station with human life and returned home safely. When I got home, my father told me that the road we had taken was famous for the many bodies that had been found. I pray that no one else ever finds themselves in a similar situation, and to the man who almost hurt my boyfriend, I had to find out. I was about 16 at the time. And because of my living situation, at least 2 times a month I had to make a 2-hour commute from an urban area to my parents' house in a rural area. I would say 90 minutes of this ride was simply a country road with nothing but fields of corn or other crops on either side, with the occasional farm or something where you would think people would voluntarily come and go. Because of the frequency with which I made this trip, I didn't pay much attention to it. Even if it meant going through a long stretch with no service on my phone or phone booth, nothing had happened yet, so surely nothing would ever happen right in the middle of one of those trips back. As night slowly fell while I was driving, I saw a headlight call. It was weird, it may just be a moment of confusion. Then another lighthouse call. Well, maybe the person coming in my direction had misaligned high beams or something. Another headlight call. Okay, something's wrong. I slowed down a bit so as not to be too blinded and thus deviated from the road, trying to understand what awaited me further on the horizon. I thought I saw one person, or in fact several. My eyesight was good at that time in my life. So I realized what was happening by putting together the elements I was seeing and getting close enough to understand. And that's when I saw that there were 4 people on this country road, lined up as if to form a roadblock and prevent all cars from passing. Another point to note is that I didn't see any cars around it from which they could have gotten there on the road. I also don't remember seeing any farms or sheds nearby. Because of my anxiety, this assembled meeting lasted 1 hour. But it had probably passed less than 5 minutes. Looking back, I was driving maybe 10 miles an hour, getting closer and realizing that without a doubt I had to be face to face with a line of 4 adults wearing huge bright white masks looking in my direction. 2 of them certainly had bats or other long contending objects. There was a man holding a lamp. So that's where the famous lighthouse calls came from. Having seen enough horror movies and heard enough stories about crimes on roads like these, I thought at the time that I only had 2 options: slow down and hope they eventually disperse around my car, taking the risk that may well catch me off guard in my little car, or speed up the pace and disregard whether or not they will get a chance to move off the road when I might eventually run into them. I chose the second option. I had no way to protect myself other than with a bat in the trunk of my own car. And at the time, I was a young teenager who could easily be knocked over by a violent slap because of my stature. And then my car was in a pretty shitty state, so anyone with a modicum of strength could force one of my doors. Now, hearing the sound of the gravel of dirt bouncing under my tires, I was more afraid of the possibility of getting off the road by taking with me strangers who, by the way, did carry bats. All this while I was speeding towards them. I was seriously panicking, but I had accepted that this was the decision I had made. Out of fear of the situation, I accelerated again, and fortunately, the two who were directly in my path jumped out of the way, just in time to not be hit. I stopped accelerating to catch my breath and saw them in my rearview mirror, the other two strangely trying to rush into my car, as if they could catch me. At that point, it became very real to me that there were people deliberately trying to catch me off guard in the middle of nowhere. Probably not just kids trying to make fun of someone, but real adults trying to harm someone passing by. I just focused on driving to get out of there as quickly as possible. I returned my attention to the road, foregoing the radio for fear of distractions, still reeling from the ordeal. The most chilling path hit when I reached home and discovered the road wasn't gravel, but strewn with nails embedded in my tires. I'm endlessly grateful for those sturdy tires and refrained from sharing the full story with my parents. And they just assumed I was reckless and someone was pulling a prank. I told the story to some of my friends and they told me it probably wasn't that serious, and these adults were just trying to scare me. Especially since being in my constituted car is a considerable advantage in this situation. Indeed, I could not deny it. But all the same, this story always gives me chills. And I remember it every time I drive down a road that looks like the one on that night. I live in a county that was pretty rural until the last 10 years. The largest city in our county is now quite populated, even overpopulated, and I hate it. I moved from there to the countryside. Now I like where I live, except that it can be really scary at night. Because for miles and miles is dark without any streetlights. A peculiarity of Seconde is that the main roads become clogged very quickly, whether because of an accident or otherwise. It is best to take the secondary roads. Secondary roads, like any other rural location, are less traveled, dark and tree-lined. A few years ago something happened that almost made me stop borrowing them. I was returning home quite late one evening, and I had decided to take a particular secondary road that saved me 10 minutes of my journey. I was tired and had to get up early, so I drove fast to get home quickly. This road is a bit busier than some, but it is very scary on some portions, because of the huge trees that line the road and whose branches and leaves carry a kind of tunnel as I darted and turned a bend. I saw what I thought was a huge garden flag, you know, the flags people put in their garden in the spring. Well, I thought it was a weird flag because it looked pretty big and high, and it was in the middle of the road as I approached. My headlights illuminated it, and it wasn't a flag, but a person. A woman. She was wearing a red fez. I live in rural Maryland. You don't see a fez every day. A long flowing white dress, and an orange reflective scarf on her chest. A little strange because she was in the middle of the road. As we got past her, things got even stranger. As dark as it was, I could see she was about 60 years old. She wore glasses, and I could even see her bright blue eyes. She looked out the window on my side and started doing something weird by jumping around. I thought she was gonna try to get in my car. Know that I was driving pretty fast. I don't know what was in her house, but she really scared me. I didn't think she was gonna steal from me. I thought she was really a soul reaper or skinwalker. Honestly, I didn't think she was human. I can't describe exactly how scary she was. I accelerated as much as I could. As I passed her, I glanced at my back seat to make sure she hadn't teleported into my car. I prayed, recited Bible verses, and continued to watch my rear-view mirror. It was spring, so it was a little hot, but I was chilled to the bone. I finally get home and tell my mom the story. I came home at a time when my brother was telling my mother that he had seen a strange lady on the road while driving. It was the same woman, but he had seen her at the intersection of the highway and the back road, while I had seen her further down the road. We both had the same reaction. She also tried to look in her car. She was jumping too. When he saw it, he said there was a car in front of him that sped up when they passed the lady. My brother was so scared that he doesn't take this road anymore, even during the day. Eventually I found out that the lady lived in the woods. Apparently his family used to live on this road. Her father was sick and she tried to take him to the hospital. He died on the way and she drove with his body in her car for hours. I assume she has mental health issues and I think she lost her home or was evicted. I have friends who live down this street, so when I told them about it, they knew exactly who it was. I continue to take this road, but I haven't seen this woman since. I hope she's okay. But I really don't want to see her again. This happened in 2017, when my girlfriend and I were visiting her aunt in Seoul, South Korea. Her aunt always loved big cities and the culture they offered, even if it got tiring at times. Seoul was also a major destination for tourists, which meant it was lively wherever you went. However, it didn't seem to bother her much. Anyway, we stayed at her place for about a week before coming home one night. During our stay, my girlfriend and I decided to go out for dinner for a little romantic evening. I'm American, and my girlfriend is obviously Korean, so I wasn't familiar with the food and had never really tried it. Previously, she recommended a restaurant that served excellent food, including popular dishes from all over Korea. The restaurant was located in the most rural parts of the city, approximately 45-minute drive. That said, we jumped in his aunt's car and started driving to the place. We saw driving about 30 minutes. I remember we were passing small rice fields when my girlfriend marked something in front of us. At first, I couldn't tell what it was, but we came to the conclusion that it was a person. Thanks to the moonlight, we could see that he threw his arms out to try to stop us. My girlfriend obviously stops and he approaches the car. He's having trouble breathing. He speaks to us in a panicked voice. He started saying things in Korean that I obviously didn't understand. She starts talking to him and translates, telling me that he got lost on a hike. He claimed he needed help getting home and he asked us to drop him off. My girlfriend, being the nice person she was, told him to get in the back and we would convert him to his destination. But just then we saw what appeared to be two people hiding in the tall grass. I wasn't sure what my girlfriend heard, but she swore one of them said, "Oh shit," in Korean. It was clearly because we had seen them. And that's when the panicked man got a shocked look on his face. The lights inside the car revealed his bright red face, as if he knew we had discovered something. However, before he could do anything, my girlfriend pretended to talk on the phone to make up an excuse to leave. His behavior completely changed, as if he was disappointed. To this, at the time, we weren't sure what was going to happen, but we didn't want to stay there. My girlfriend turned the car around and we drove off without looking back. At that moment, we knew that whatever their intentions were, they were not good, and that we should not stay there another second. Our romantic dinner was obviously cancelled that night, but we never talked about it further. South Korea is known for being very safe, so the chances of something like this happening were slim. A month later, my girlfriend's aunt saw a report about 2 missing people near where we had seen her men. Reports said it was because the 2 people were drunk and had drifted apart. But I always doubted that. I'm still not sure if what we encountered was some kind of ambush of traps or just people pulling a joke. Even with those scenarios, in my head, I find the second one to be a little too optimistic. I have never been back to Korea, and neither has my girlfriend. When I was about 18, I had just finished high school and had bought myself a new car as a graduation gift for myself. It was a used car with a lot of mileage, but it was still in excellent condition to drive me from point A to point B. I remember enjoying the car so much that I often drove it around my town with buddies. Sometimes faced with many challenges in my life, I used to take long car trips at night to calm my mind. Most people think that music or marijuana can help you calm down, but I quickly discovered that driving alone was very relaxing. Having this time alone for yourself to clear your mind was better than any kind of music or drugs. Small precision out of context. My father is a heavy drinker. He would sometimes come home to argue with my mother or me. It often ended in my frustration and drove me out late at night to calm me down. Needless to say, my family is extremely dysfunctional in many ways. One night I just got home from work and found my parents fighting like always, needing air and wanting to get away. I jumped in my car and drove around town to clear my mind. I live in a small town in Massachusetts known as one of the safest cities in the United States. It was a quiet night, and I was driving down the street, admiring life itself. When I saw something in the middle of the road, I stopped my car and saw a baby stroller in the middle of the road. At first I thought it might have been a broken stroller that someone threw away, but it seemed too innocuous, I thought. But who rocks a stroller on the road at 9 o'clock in the morning? That said, I got out of my car and started to hear a little crying coming from the stroller. At this point I was so lost, I didn't know what to do because I had never been in a situation like this. Note that it was early autumn, so it was quite cold at night. I calmly walked to the stroller, and that's when the crying stopped immediately. I slowly removed the blanket and saw that it was not a baby, but a doll. My heart almost stopped when I saw what I was facing, as my mind started imagining macabre scenarios. I looked to my left and saw a black figure sticking its head out from behind a tree. In the dim light of my car, I could vaguely see his face. I don't know if it was because I was tired or scared, but his face seemed to be distorted. Without hesitation, I got back in my car and just bypassed the stroller on the road to go home. I had been gone for about an hour, and when I got home, both my parents were asleep. I did not close an eye of the night, for my mind still could not comprehend what I had seen. I thought about talking to the police, but I knew whoever was there would be gone if the police came.